Alright, today we're going to take a look at a watch that's kind of been evading me for a while. It was released a while back, but it sold out pretty quickly, like a lot of these limited edition Seikos. But I was finally able to get one pre-owned, and I'm pretty excited to review this one. So today we're going to take a look at the Seiko Spirit SCED057. This is one of the Giugiaro's reissue watches. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But essentially the history on this one is that a lot of these old designs were reissued by Seiko, and they were made in this limited run a couple of years back. So box wise, this is pretty standard. And they were released in like a lot of Seiko limited releases. Some of them were sold out pretty instantly, some weren't. Here it is. So in essence, the situation is that there are a couple of different variants of this watch that are pretty readily available now for anywhere between $150 to $250. But this specific variant, so like I said, I did get this pre-owned, so the links are already out. And just looking at this, I could see that this does have a pin and collar system, which pretty classic Seiko, but I'm very much not a fan of. But like I was saying, this specific model became very sought after, and I think it has something to do with the colors. Something about orange and light gray like this tends to hit well with the watch crowd. But this specific model became pretty difficult to find, and the prices started shooting up like crazy. So I've seen these sell for anywhere up to $400, $450, while the variants of it that are pretty much the same thing, just minus the color coordination of it, are selling for half that price. But I was finally able to find one. Actually, a buddy of mine sold it on Instagram, and he pretty much sold me a great price, and I just had to have it. So here it is. There's a lot to unpack about this design, and I've actually been wearing this for a few days, so my thoughts on it kind of changed every day. So I'll talk a little bit about some of these things, these design cues. So right away you can tell this is not your classic design. This is not your usual Seiko, this is not your usual chronograph. So the story of these is that these were made for riders, for bike riders, motorcycle riders, so that when you're riding on your wrist, it is actually perfectly aligned to your line of sight. But if you put this directly in front, you can see the dial is a little bit off here. To me, that's just something super cool. It's something really kind of quirky. You don't see that often. And see right here, this is a 6 o'clock right here, but you can see all the sub dials are kind of just shifted a little bit. And I could totally understand how a lot of people would hate that. A lot of the obsessive people are gonna just feel uncomfortable with this. I see that, and I actually quite like this. And I have found myself taken advantage of this kind of slight off dial when I'm driving. But that's the story of these. And now the design itself is really different. We can start just by the bracelet itself. This is something very unlike Seiko, and I would say this is more of a collaboration with Giugiaro, this kind of design. But this kind of bracelet really is not your usual Seiko bracelet. Here's a clasp right here. And one of the little details that actually took me a few days to see was this indentation on the bracelet lines up perfectly with the 12 o'clock. That's a really nice touch to really kind of align you, because really it is difficult to kind of see exactly where it is aligned. But this right here ends, this indentation ends right at the 12 o'clock, and that's a nice touch. Let's start the chronograph just so take a look at it. Pretty standard here. The case itself is really all over the place, and I say that in a good way. It has all sorts of different indentations. It's not symmetrical whatsoever. The pushers themselves are super different. I've never seen anything like this, not just color wise but the shape of them. Top pusher is this rectangle while the bottom pusher is a tiny little circle, but they function just about how any other chronograph does. There's an indentation by the crown that actually allows you to grab it, and I will say that I actually it is a little difficult to get the crown out, but it being a quartz, you don't really need to be taking it out all that much. But that is one thing that I have found difficult. Now the back, let's see if you can take a look at it here. It has information on the watch, Giugiaro's design. Trying to get it to focus here. And of course, like I said, this is a limited run, so 1,000 of these were made. This is number 294. But the case itself is also very different through the back. You can see there's this big bulge here that comes out, really breaking the symmetry of this. And it actually, this little thing here makes it sit on the wrist very kind of comfortably. I've never seen anything like this, and I've never really thought about it, but wearing it, you would think that having this big bulge here would kind of make it uncomfortable, but it really doesn't. Again, super different, super unique. Now the bracelet here, you can see how it goes right out of the case. This is not your usual bracelet. And because of the design, the dimensions are going to be a little off. So the dimensions advertised for this watch is 43mm case, which I'm not questioning, but what really is a issue here is that this does not wear like a 43mm watch. The case being oddly shaped, not perfectly circular, not symmetrical. Wearing this, and we'll do some size comparisons in a bit, wearing this really does wear more like a 38mm chronograph. It's just the case itself is a little bit odd, but the dial on the wrist will look a lot smaller than the 43mm case dimensions imply. Thickness, this is pretty thin. This runs at 11.5mm. Pretty thin and pretty on par with quartz chronographs. Water resistance is of 100 meters. Again, a surprisingly nice water resistance for a lot of chronographs. The lug width is of 18mm, but again, I'm not sure how this would look. Maybe I'll try it someday to take it off the bracelet, but this looks like a watch that just needs to stay specifically on this bracelet, seeing how some of this design goes right into the case. But needless to say, this is a very unique design. This is something, there really isn't anything like this out there, and I think that's part of the reason why this sold so well and became so sought after. Now, one of the things I do not like, and I was actually really surprised, is a lack of loom. Seiko pretty much looms everything, and not just looms everything, but looms it better than most. But this one, for some reason, was not loomed. So that's a little bit of a disappointment, but not really a deal breaker. So I brought out some of these watches here, and well, usually what I try to do is bring out popular watches that a lot of people own or are familiar with to really compare the size of it. And of course, the turtle. Most of us are familiar with the turtle. We all know it. We all love it. And see, if I take the bracelet part down, you can see that the case is actually significantly smaller than the turtle. And it will be significantly thinner too. But with the bracelet out like this, it does look like it would be relatively big. This is very deceiving. It does not wear like this. And we'll see right now when I throw it on the wrist how even in my really small 6.5-inch wrist, it really does wear nicely. But again, here it is next to the turtle. And of course I had to bring out the Speedmaster here just because everybody knows the size of it. And it's the same thing, if you really look at it with the case alone, even then it does look bigger, which I guess the 43mm would be bigger than the Speedmaster. But if you look at just the dial sizes here, you can tell that the Speedmaster is going to actually wear bigger than the Seiko despite the dimensions, just because the dial is a lot bigger with a kind of small bezel. Whereas this has a similar bezel but a very, very big case. And of course the Speedmaster is going to be quite a bit chunkier too. So let's go ahead and throw this on the wrist and on some natural daylight too, to see how it looks. But really, I'm pretty impressed by this, and it's just such a quirky watch that I think every collection needs something like this. But let's go ahead and throw it on the wrist and see how that works. So on the wrist, it does wear significantly smaller than the dimensions imply. It's really comfortable. It's actually surprisingly comfortable for the lack of symmetry, but it fits really well on my small wrist. It's thin enough to kind of just wear with long sleeve shirt, but it's also casual enough to wear just with a t-shirt. Super fun watch, super different, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be enjoying this for a long time to come.